Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ray Tampa podcast. Our podcast offers bold commentary on various subject matters with a laser-like focus on the truth. My name is Ray Tampa, and I'm the host of the Ray Tampa podcast. We have in our studio Mr. Russell Cato, a retired educator with more than 40 plus years of experience in the Pinellas County schools, and Mr. Jamie Wilson, a healthcare provider with more than 25 years of experience working as a physical therapist. My co-host, my dynamic co-host. Also, we're very pleased to have in the studio with us today, Dr. Pastor Manuel Sykes of Bethel Community Baptist Church, and Miss Maria Scruggs, CEO of the Phyllis Wheatley Rise to Read campaign, and a host of other titles. we'll leave those alone for right now. We're going to talk a little about Black history. This is Black History Month. And we're going to focus our discussion on two historical figures from our community to discuss, as well as some others. On December 30th, 1966, OMALI YESHITELA, formerly known as Joe Waller, made the decision to go to St. Petersburg's City Hall and tear down a very offensive racist mural. The mural, positioned in the staircase, depicted Blacks performing for white beachgoers at Paso Grill Beach. The Blacks were characterized with oversized lips and strumming banjos. And yeah, the ever-present watermelon was pictured. Mr. YESHITELA had tried to reason with city officials about the gross nature of the painting, but was unsuccessful. As a matter of fact, the city manager at the time reportedly said he had walked past the mural many times and could not find anything offensive about it. Yeah, he would say that. It seems apparent that Mr. YESHITELA and his fellow group members were forced to take matters into their own hands. After snatching the mural from the wall, they walked down Central Avenue and past the symbols of racism, the green benches. Before long, they were stopped by the police and arrested. OMALI was charged and convicted of grand larceny. He served 2 years of a 5-year sentence before the Supreme Court intervened on his behalf. 8 years before OMALI's arrest, a 19-year-old by the name of David ISOM demonstrated his courage and conviction by taking a swim in the whites-only spa pool in July of 1958. Mr. Isom purchased his ticket just as all the other guests had done. But when he got in the water, the whites all got out. Mr. Isom was swimming alone for about 45 minutes. Give me a second here. Once he left, the pool manager drained the pool and scrubbed the pool to eliminate all instances of a, quote, nigger having been in it.
Hmm.
2, the pool remained closed for about a week before City Council ordered it reopened to all residents. Mr. ISOM'S bravery marks the end of the segregated swimming pools in St. Petersburg. Mr. ISOM'S bravery and activism didn't stop with the pool incident. He is credited with fighting the discrimination of Blacks from eating at the downtown lunch counters and restaurants. Kudos to this courageous young resident, or young president, that is, of the NAACP's Youth Council for his taking a stand where it mattered. At the tender age of 31, Mr. Isom was shot and killed in Deerfield, Florida. The death is still shrouded in mystery. Wow. Okay, we have 2 figures that were just recently mentioned in my opening narrative. Mr. OMALI YESHITELA and Mr. David Isom. I want to ask this rhetorical question. Can we all agree that these 2 incidents represent important points in our city's history?
Sure.
Absolutely.
If so, where can we go and get representation of these historical facts?
When you say representation, do you mean specific, like plaques, statues, or what exactly when you talk about?
When I speak of representation, I'm talking about photos, I'm talking about plaques, I'm talking about anything suggesting that these historical facts occurred.
I have not seen anything.
You have not, have you?
No, I have not.
Russ, have you?
No, not in St. Petersburg, but I knew of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew.
Jamie,
of it.
have you? Now, the sad thing is, we're all residents of this city for long periods of time. Generally, 4 of us for lifetimes.
Mhm.
Dr. Sykes moved here some time ago, but that's
1993.
a sad thing. Where do we find representation of not just these 2 historical figures, but so many others? So many others.
Let me just say something, because what you're saying really dovetail with a funeral I did on yesterday.
Okay.
Mrs. Neverta Reed, who passed away at 99 years old.
99.
The title of my sermon was Black History. And in it, I suggested that if we were to put together the obituaries of the people in St. Petersburg who have made an impact over the years, it would be voluminous, and it would preserve history right here, something that the people here need to know, because while the curriculum and the books, over the nation are being banned, there's nothing that would prohibit the people here, the young people here, from knowing about the historical figures that have been here, and in fact that are here still making history, because Black history happens every day. We can talk about George Washington Carver, Martin Luther King, and all of those figures, but as you say, there's unsung heroes who have made a huge difference, and they're not memorialized. And what I look at is that we have a museum here, but we have not yet taken in those historical figures of a local nature and somehow memorialize them through painting or even through verbiage, a plaque. And that's something I suggested. I said, if you give it to me, I'll put together the manuscript for it. But obviously, that's a person coming into the community saying, hey, you got something here we need to put together to remember. But there were others in the audience who said, yeah, we're going to do that. And that's fortunate because too much is being lost
right.
right here.
Mm-hmm.
When elderly people die, such as the one you just described, 99 years old, 89 years old, 109, whatever the age might be, it's like the saying goes, when an elderly person dies, a museum or a library dies.
Mm-hmm.
That person is
Information.
taking with him or her
Information.
a lot of history,
Mhm.
a lot of knowledge,
Mhm.
and we need to capture that
Mhm.
knowledge, that history. And it's so sad. We're living in what, the third largest state in the country, the fifth largest city in the state, and we don't have a museum to speak of representing our history.
Well, and I think a lot of that is by design. I was the former director of Hope Six on the supportive services side of Hope Six in Jordan Park. And the vision for an African American museum in St. Petersburg was the vision of the residents of Jordan Park. And we started the work of building a foundation for a museum
Mhm.
that would do just as we're talking about now.
Mhm.
And because I was not very familiar, well, not familiar at all with how do you even begin to start a museum, I went to the director of the Holocaust Museum
Mhm.
and said, "Hey, this is what the residents of St. Peter of Jordan Park are interested in doing. I know nothing about museum operations. Can I be a part? Can you guys mentor me?" Sure enough, short story, I was on the board. Darrell Irians and I, who was the former CEO, went around the country to different museums. What was shocking to me is once that development agreement was signed and the residents had signed off on Hope Six, all hopes of a dream of a African American museum went out the window. What we have now isn't even zoned for a museum. It technically cannot be zoned for a museum. So the fact that it does not represent the artifacts that we had hoped and envisioned is by no surprise, and am very, very much in belief that was never the intent. And now there seems to be a lot of movement behind the Woodson building a museum. But sad to say, when you look at museums as they have been built in other communities, I just don't know if we'll ever get to see this museum come to fruition. And if it did, if it would be representative of what we know it should be.
Good
Wow.
points, good
Right.
points. Either one of you?
Yeah, I just want to say this. If you notice that the name of this museum is Carla G. Woodson. I'm willing to bet no one on this board know why that name came up. How did it get that name? I bet nobody knows. I know.
Mhm.
It came from Frank Pierce.
Mm.
There was a something like a game or something came out. They were fighting for a name. So Adrian and her teams came up with this name, Carla G. Woodson, and they accepted it.
Mm.
It came out of Frank Pierce, black neighborhood.
Nice.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I
Okay,
just want to mention it.
good point. Jay, you got anything?
I was kind of listening to what you guys were saying about plaques. Before we get to museum or in the process of getting a museum, what about like our parks that's in black neighborhoods just have some type of, just something with historical, like they have the love Martin Luther King, like something like in each little park, because all our black kids know is that we were enslaved. They don't know anything great, other than Martin Luther King, but our true history is powerful people. That's all they're taught in school, and that's going to be eradicated.
One of the things that Maria mentioned about the zoning. Zoning is a construct by a group of people, City Hall at that current time. When an area is not zoned for a particular building or business, that leaves it open for them to remove it or to destroy it. Whereas you see downtown and other places, zonings change to accommodate,
Mhm.
okay, developers and others. So that in itself is a warning that at some point they could come along and say, well, this is not zoned for a museum. You see, that part is something that we have to be careful of, because you always have these rules that apply only to us and the things we treasure. But at the same time, allowances are made. I found out, for instance, that my house, which is next to a church, is not zoned for multifamily. But 2 blocks down the street, 2 lights down the street, there are condos going up. You see, the zoning is something that's used to constrict our ability to be economically or otherwise independent. So we have to be careful, because if we were able to gather the kind of information that's really, really important to this area, it would attract attention to that area, just like the Collard Green Festival. Can you imagine that being a time where that display is, unveiled? So what we're dealing with here is two things, actually. We have a dearth of information that's been gathered on these local heroes, but also we're leaving the door open for it to be moved altogether. And given the rents and all of that stuff that's here, where is it going to move? It's not endowed to the level that it can pay the kind of money in another location. That's some of the things we have to realize. And the name Carter G. Woodson really is a testament to how our history revolves around certain people who are outside the community, who might have made national news. So Carter G. Woodson, George Washington Carver, Martin Luther King, God bless them all. But naming a local museum after people who are in other places still does not direct the attention of the community inward.
Right.
That's another issue. Now, I'm not against Carter G. Woodson. God knows that. I'm simply saying that if you don't put the spotlight on the local accomplishments, the Dr. Alsop's and the Sanderlands and all these people that I came here and was taught about, then obviously the people that are here have not rejoiced, or let's just say honored, those persons. Miss Reed, we buried yesterday. There were so many people out in the audience who she taught in first grade. This lady was a legend. You follow what I'm saying? Lived to be 99. But what happens now? You see?
You're right.
And that's one of the things that we have consistently lost. When Reuben Minson passed on, I was devastated, because I knew firsthand that he was one of the people that I reached out to when we had this vision, when the residents of Jordan Park had this vision for this museum. And I knew the actual physical artifacts that he had. And I think what this speaks to, and we keep speaking about it, the sad part about it is we don't do a thing about it. That's the thing that really frustrates me, is because we have consistently allowed our history to go minimize, marginalize. We're at another crossroads of the historic gas plant. It appears that the Rays may back out of this deal. We don't know that. You know what? Because I am a believer in Almighty God, I have to wonder if it's not God's will that it not be done.
Thank you.
When I came back in town to see that roof torn off of Tropicana Field, I had to wonder if God was trying to get our attention one last time.
Divine.
One last time.
Because I'm going to be honest with you, I made public that I was praying for something of biblical proportions, like a sinkhole, to appear in that area where everything went down. So there'd be no doubt in anybody's mind that God was doing something.
Let me speak to what you're saying and what you're saying. After the vote to approve the deal by the city council, I called Dr. Sykes, and what Dr. Sykes said to me was, all we can do now is pray for divine intervention. Pray for divine intervention.
Got it.
And I feel very strongly that's what we got, divine intervention.
Yeah.
Now, a city council member called herself throwing a barb at me for saying that. And I quickly threw a barb back at her. But you can believe what you want to believe, or you cannot believe what you don't want to believe. But I believe what he said. Divine intervention.
That is hallowed ground. That there were Black folks that gave up their property, their lives for that dang stadium to be built. I was invited to City Hall with the late David Welch when Roy Otto, who was a former city council city planner, wanted to meet with Black leaders on 16th Street about Tropicana. And I was excited. I was relatively new back to St. Pete, and honored that Mr. Welch invited me to attend. And when we got there, the meeting was about the city wanting to sell to the Black business owners on 16th Street the idea of planting palm trees down 16th Street. And at first I sat up in my seat and I thought, okay, this must be some kind of joke. Well, it wasn't. And I said to the businessmen there, I said, do you all really believe that by us, the city putting $500,000 in palm trees, going from Tropicana south is going to bring business to, and that's what they were selling them, that the people are going to leave Tropicana and come down your street because of the palm trees. I said, it'll never happen. And Dr. Welch, is loving as he said, well, baby, we got to learn to crawl. We got to crawl before we can walk. We've been crawling ever since.
I know it.
Yeah.
Well, when I came to St. Pete and the ice, it was what the name of the team that plays hockey?
Lightning.
The Lightning.
Yeah.
They literally would block off 16th Street
Truly.
so that whites and the traffic could not come that way. So of course, we protested and so forth and so on, and they opened it. Around the same time, they what their name again? The Lightning bolted over to Tampa. So we got some serendipity here. But literally, all of those promises that were made, ultimately lies. And you ask yourself, how do we know?
Yeah.
How do we know that politicians and business people like that align? The clue is when their lips are moving. And if we don't understand that, we'll be like some of the people on the council,
right,
taking the okie doke and literally defending that kind of lack of self-interest, trying to make us believe that what's being done and what they're agreeing to is right for us. We should have grown up by now as a people in a society.
I want to make this point off the subject a little, but sitting in this room right now, 3 of the last 4 NAACP elected presidents here in St. Petersburg, 3 of the last 4 are sitting in this room. What we 3 have in common is the fact that we will say what needs to be said. We have the courage to say what needs to be said. We're not kiss-ups. Nobody could ever say, I'm a kiss-up, or Maria is a kiss-up, or Dr. Sykes is a kiss-up. We don't do it. We never have. But I will say that it's an unfortunate situation going on right now. Very unfortunate, because Ken Welch, and I'm going to have to double check this, but I'm going to offer a comment based on what knowledge I have. Ken Welch recently did his State of the City address. Oh my God.
All right.
He walks on water based on his address. All the highlights of last year and all the projections for this year. But I can't remember if he mentioned Tropicana Field in all he said. He must be embarrassed by the stupidity that he put forth on this city. And the raise, like you said earlier, probably are going to walk away from the deal.
Hope they do.
I hope they do.
Hope
Well, a lot of people hope that.
If,
A lot of
they
people.
can play in Tampa at the Yankee practice stadium,
12,000
that
people.
speaks to the audience that they've been
True.
carrying as an average. Because under most circumstances, they would say we're going to lose money by decreasing the number of seats.
Yeah.
The truth is, those billionaires don't go anywhere where they're not going to make money. That's a rule of thumb, you know. And the sad part about it is that here we are, what, a little more than 40 years later, and you have the same characters,
nothing changed.
different bodies, same minds. And that's, brothers
True.
and sister,
Mhm.
is it's an indictment. It's an indictment. And then if we're afraid to say what it is, then we do ourselves and our community a disservice.
It's certain.
Mhm.
Let me just say one thing about the NAACP. Here's my first encounter. One night, my parents came home in a whisper, and they were saying how Martin Luther King had come to our local church. The NAACP had brought him there. And I mean, it was hush hush. It was like top secret that they went out and they heard him speak. So in my mind, as a child, now he died in what, 68. I was born in 57. So I was old enough to be impressed by that. That was a powerful organization all of my life. And I gravitated to it when I went to Newark, New Jersey. I joined. But guess what happened when I was in Newark, New Jersey? They would have the president crying. Here you were in an organization designed for the uplift of Black folk, and the internal politics were so raw that the president was literally crying during meetings. See, and that's when the idea of what potential this had imploded and had ceased to be something that people would fear. Now that was in the 80s. Move it up into 20 years later when I got involved here, really through you, Ray, the same kind of thing. We eat our own.
Yeah.
And so we're not able to mount a protest against stuff. I went to Tallahassee when what's his name? The sanctimonious called African American history no longer viable or valuable. I didn't see them there. I saw equal ground. I saw Faith in Florida. In fact, I went with Faith in Florida. Not a mumbling word from the NAACP. All this stuff that Trump has did.
Nothing.
All they did was a warning about travel warning. Nothing.
That's it.
The most powerful organization in our history is a toothless lion.
And
know,
today,
Toothless lion.
today, 1 second,
Go on, I want-
today, can anybody in here tell us what the NAACP St. Petersburg has said about what's going on with Trump and his administration?
All I can tell you is that there was a meeting and they came out in support of the raise deal. That's the last thing I've heard.
That's right.
Nothing about Trump.
That's right.
But let me also say this really quickly. I felt hamstrung because so much of what we wanted to do, you had to go through the state and the national before you could do it. And so that means your reaction time was slowed. Any kind of protest, it had to be signed off on, in order for you to march or protest anything. So what do? By the time the incident occurs and you hear from Baltimore, it's already passed.
Let me, Russ, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I listened to what Marie said about, I think, Dr. Wells, that we got to crawl, something like that. Then you mentioned something about the same mind, the same place, something like that. I think you said that.
Mm-hmm.
When I go back to Joe Wall, 1968, he did something that was outstanding to me. I'll be honest with you, because he did not have help with us. We were so damn divided. The damn black conservative leaders was getting at Joe Waller for doing that kind of stuff.
Now, what you're speaking to is what I wanted to get into, but we don't have time.
Okay, go on.
We got about 10 seconds.
going.
But that's a great point. I wish we had time to really get into it. But having said that, you got the time out. I want to thank our guests,
Okay.
Dr. Sykes and Maria Scruggs. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you being here. To my co-host, Jamie, Russ, thanks for a job well done. As always, to you, the listeners, we appreciate you tuning in to 99.1 FM, The Bird, each and every Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. and listening to the Ray Tampa podcast. And we also invite you to go to YouTube, type in the Ray Tampa podcast, and you can see them all. And with that being said, good evening. Good evening.